to yet another edition of the Taste Talks. So we have Sruthi Swaminathan back with us yet again, and she is going to be doing a pasta dish for us today. So Sruthi, please tell us all about this dish. I'm very excited for this. It sounds delicious.
So, today I'm going to be making a pasta. I'm specifically going to be making a farfalle, which is this bow tie pasta, but the shape doesn't matter. You can use any shape. But the twist on it is going to be, instead of using your traditional like marinara sauce, like tomato-based sauce, or using a cream kind of cheese Alfredo type sauce, we're going to mix it up. And the sauce is actually going to be a coconut tahini sauce. So coconut, you know, maybe you traditionally associate that with like Thai flavors or Indian flavors. Tahini, obviously, with like Middle Eastern and Arabic flavors. But today we're actually going to combine those two and create a sauce from that and put some veggies in as well. So let me go ahead and show you what I have in terms of ingredients. So the first thing I'm doing right now is I'm just boiling some water. I'm actually just going to salt the water. And then once it comes to boil, I'm going to add the pasta and just cook the pasta in there according to package instructions. So nothing really new. So let me just put this sauce, there's the salt in, and I'm going to wait for this to come to a boil. And I have this book, I don't know if you know it. It's called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. It's actually right here by Samin Nusrat. And when I first got this book, I only buy cookbooks. Very particular. I only buy cookbooks that have like photos for each recipe. But this one doesn't have that. It's actually illustrated beautifully. And it's not so much about providing strict recipes as it is about like things to keep in mind while cooking, which is how I think about food and how I cook. And so it works really well. So one thing I learned from there is the importance of salt. So it's not just about like how much salt you use, but it's what type of salt you use. Are you using table salt? In kosher salt, or using sea salt, or using Maldon salt with has like the little flakes? Are you using it for flavor? Are you using it for texture at the very end? Are you using it for a little contrast at the top of like a chocolate brownie, which I don't eat because I don't really like chocolate, but at the top of it to like bring a little saltiness to the sweetness? Another thing she says often in the book is when you salt your pasta water, you want it to taste like the summer sea. So we're not like drinking copious amounts of sea, but she just says like it should taste very, very salty. The idea being that salt is eventually not going in your sauce. It's there to cook the pasta. The pasta itself doesn't have any salt, so you really need that concentration of salt outside the pasta in order for it to be able to diffuse into the pasta once it softens up in the water. So while that's heating up, I'm going to show you all of the ingredients that I have, which are, should I show this to you? We're going to do this in a few steps. So the first thing I'm going to show you is, it might seem weird the first thing I show you here, because if you watched my classes, the thing I always add first is like onions, which we're still gonna add onions, like don't worry about that. But what we're also gonna do first is add these things. So these are oyster mushrooms. I got them at H Mart. This is like the Asian grocery store near me. You can use any kind of mushrooms. I'm just using these this time because I thought when you cut them up, they make these sort of longer pieces. They're a little more firm. They're not super, super watery, and they do have kind of a good flavor, and they're a little like denser. I don't want to say meatier because not everybody likes things to taste or feel like meat, but that's generally what it's like. And I just didn't cut this one because I wanted to show you. But the first thing we're going to do is saute up some of these mushrooms. I'm going to crisp them up, set them aside, and then use it as a topping at the very end. And again, because I want to maintain that texture of the mushrooms, and I want to add some crispiness to the pasta since everything else is so creamy. All right, so I have here, I'm going to switch you over. Why don't I show you the ingredients first? So I just told you I'm first, you see some of this? I showed you the mushrooms. We're first going to saute that up. So let me show you that, and then I'll show you the other ingredients. So move the camera this way. that clear, Christine?
Yes.
Okay, great. So,
Yeah, the sun's a little bright, but we can still see.
oh, it's a little bright. Okay, hang on.
No, we're fine. We're fine. It's just in the back. It's not bothering the pan.
I know, I'm not used to it being so bright
I
during
know it's exciting because remember when we first for the longest time it was the taste talk started and it was just dark out. So it's nice to see the sun some more.
Exactly. Okay, so here's some olive oil, just like regular extra virgin olive oil. I put it in the pan. Maybe a little more oil than I would normally use. You're not fully like deep frying the onions, but you do want the oil to kind of be able to crisp up the onions. So I have this on like medium high-ish heat. I'm just gonna toss one in to see. I can kind of hear it crackling, but I think I mentioned before, I like it to be hot before I add things to the pan. I don't add things to a cold pan. I don't add things to cold oil because then it ends up absorbing the oil instead of sort of like cooking or like frying in it. All right, so that seems okay-ish. Maybe a little bit more. So you can see like the smoke rising off it, which makes you think it is super hot. But since I just added the oil, it's not quite hot enough. Okay.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, you can see that.
I can hear it now.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just gonna toss these mushrooms right in there. Even though these may not have as much water as say like bok choy or something, or some varieties of mushrooms, they still do have water. So what I talked about in what I talked about in sort of previous classes is when I want something to fry versus gradually soften or gradually kind of let out. Onions are a great example. You know, I don't salt onions, but if I want them to kind of get crispy, then I'm not salting them right away because then it's drawing out the water and it's making it more mushy and soft. So with these mushrooms, I do not want it to get all mushy and soft. So I'm going to let them fry up a little bit and then I'm going to add some salt. And those actually smell very good. And actually, that reminds me, I still have one more mushroom to cut up, which I kept. So I'm going to chop that. So if you guys have any questions in the meantime, you can feed them through.
Yeah, so just so that everyone knows, we do have this recipe. We haven't sent it out yet. I will be sending it out to the email list tomorrow. So if you are not on the email list, make sure and email us at taste@nl.edu so that you can get all of the communication with recipes, upcoming taste talks, and all of that.
Yeah. So here, see, I'm just cutting them lengthwise so they look like this. And then I'm actually going to cut these in half and then cut them this way. And that's just a preference. If you want them to be, you know, even stay longer, a little bit thicker, that's fine too. Just make sure that however you decide to cut them, you cut them all kind of a similar way so that they cook at about the same rate. It also goes to say, usually I would, you know, ideally add all of this in at the same time, but not a problem. I'm just going to add them now. You're seeing kind of a hint of some future ingredients coming in here because I use the same cutting stand, but I'll get into that in a little bit. Okay, I'm sauteing these. It actually smells really good just with the olive oil and the mushrooms. And I've made this in a way before where instead of frying the mushrooms like this, I'll like put in my onions, I'll put in my garlic, I'll do that, and then I'll add the mushrooms in with like the meat or with the vegetable crumbles or whatever. And if I do that, the mushrooms just get softer in there. You know, you add them towards the end if you want to maintain a little more texture. And I've actually never made it like this before where I crisp them up. But there was, I've recently gotten really into a couple like vegan cooking channels on YouTube. And as you guys know, if you've watched any of my classes, like I'm not vegan by like a long shot, right? I don't try to be like, how many mushrooms did you use? I used 5 oyster mushrooms. They're like bigger oyster mushrooms. And you don't have to use oyster. You can use cremini, you can use portobello. Those work really well here. The ones I avoid, unless I'm just using it for like a stuffed mushroom, are white button mushrooms, because they just don't have as much flavor. And I would like this to bring a little bit of flavor in addition to the texture. A little bit longer, and it should be good. And then you can see there's like steam coming off this. I'm going to put my pasta in the meantime. And this, like I said, is bow tie pasta. I've also made this with like the shells. I've made it with spaghetti. It also works really well. You'll see with some of the things you're using, it works well with like rigatoni if you're using ground meat or like ground crumbles like I'm going to, or vegetarian crumbles. But then it has space to like get into the little cylinders, and you get a lot of that flavor with each bite. Okay, so this water is boiling. I'm going to add the pasta. This is like what, 12 ounces of pasta. And anytime I make pastas, I'm always like, I do one of two things. Either I'm like, oh, like this is so much pasta. I'm going to be eating this for 3 days. And it's basically like 2 meals plus 2 snacks late at night. And like it's over. Another mistake I make with pasta, I'm still working on, is I like get excited about adding more pasta. So again, if you guys have seen it, I'm like not accurately measuring everything and things. I'll add some pasta and I'll be like, oh, I could probably add some more, right? But then I'll add more, and then what'll happen is the sauce to pasta ratio will get all messed up, and then it won't taste good.
So we do have someone asking for a confirmation. So boil water, then add pasta, not pasta and then boil the water. You always
right. You boil the water. I boil the water first, just because like when the water's hot, the pasta just cooks faster. The water just gets into the, because I'm using dried pasta, right? If I was using fresh pasta, I don't know if I'd even have to get it to a full boil. Maybe like a slight simmer is fine, just because fresh pasta cooks in a couple minutes. Mm-hmm. It's probably going to take like 8-9 minutes. Sometimes depends on the shape. All right. I'm going to grab a bowl that I can put this in. And then this and watch it. Yeah, so what I was saying is like when the sauce to pasta ratio gets messed up, it's quite sad. Because if you've made a sauce and you're like, man, this is so bomb, like just tastes delicious. Then you put the pasta and you put too much pasta and you're like, oh, it's missing something. It's not missing anything, you just added too much pasta.
Yeah, we tend to, in this household, my husband will sometimes make a huge amount of pasta. And then if there's a sauce, they don't come together until they're eaten. He keeps them separated because he's like, that pasta is an option to go with anything else that could be in the fridge too. So he always keeps them separate. So he always makes sure to add a little bit of oil at the end with his pasta so that when it sits in the fridge, it doesn't tend to stick and clump and stuff.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Oh, add a little oil so the pasta that's not in the sauce doesn't stick.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point. I was mentioning before, I've gotten really into like these vegan YouTube cooking channels. There's a couple of them I'm really enjoying. And on one of them, this girl, she makes mushroom stroganoff, like vegan mushroom stroganoff, which I'm actually going to make later this week. And what I like about her channel is I'm not vegan. Like I love my dairy, I love my eggs, my cheese, I love my chicken, I love my fish. But with her thing, she's not trying too hard to just find like meat substitute, like a substitute for this, a substitute for that. She's just trying to make food that tastes delicious and uses things that are vegan. I know the whole vegan community is also like, is this vegan? Is that vegan? I don't know, but she basically makes it so like, how can I create a good recipe with things that I normally eat? And for her, the things she normally eats happen to be things that are also vegan. So her mushroom stroganoff recipe looked amazing, but she added like nutritional yeast, which I'm not going to add. I'm going to be adding cheese, but like that's the point. You can kind of modify it. Oh, also add a bit of oil to pasta.
Yeah.
You know, I always forget to do that. Like I almost never do it, but when I do, it is better. Like it doesn't stick and kind of comes apart.
Especially when he makes like rigatonis and farfalles and like the bigger shaped pastas and stuff. He always makes sure to have like some oil in it when it's finished. So
okay. All right. So here's this. I just added a little bit of salt at the very end. You guys can see that. That looks like. I'm going to take this out. You can see it? I just tried a little piece. It's not like ultra crispy. If you wanted it to be, you could add a little more oil into it. But what this is going to do is it's going to give that nice umami, that nice texture at the very end.
mm-hmm.
And super simple. All it is a little bit of oil, a little more than a little bit of oil, the oyster mushrooms, and the salt. Okay. So this in here. All right, so this pan is still very hot. I'm actually going to turn it down a little because sometimes if you overheat the oil, it gets that like, I don't know, extremely hot oil flavor. So not burnt.
We're always coining new terms here.
Because I said I was classically trained, so I don't really know what that is. Like, okay, again, a little bit of oil. I've turned the heat down to basically low. And what I'm going to do now is show you the rest of the things that go in there. So let's go this way and I'll show you the ingredients. So now we have the pasta going. We've made what's going to go on top of the pasta. We haven't made the base of the sauce at all. So here we go. First thing, red onion. As always, I don't know if I've ever showed a recipe where I don't have onion. This is a lot of onion. But I love it. And we're going to cook it kind of to get them softened so that you're not going to get that super sharp flavor from it, which you could get if you did it raw. And if you joined my last class, I made, that was the stuffed peppers. I made a version that had like raw onion and then sauteed onion. And they were slightly different flavor profiles, but they both tasted good. So a bunch of onion. We're going to just add that in. So it starts off cooking. Same pan. That's the other key here is like, I always tell Christine, I'm like, man, when I do these classes, it's the only time I do my like mise en place and have all my bowls. You know, otherwise I'm just cooking as I go to try to avoid doing dishes. But when you make like specifically Asian food, this isn't, I wouldn't call this like an Asian dish, but you make Asian food and you're making things in the wok like a stir fry, you kind of have to have everything ready. Because one thing I've realized is like heat is much quicker than my chopping skills. So it like cooks way, I'm like, yeah, I could chop this up, but like not fast enough. So, all right, so the onions are in there. And before someone reminds me, I'm going to salt them. Okay. Salting the onions. All right, and while that sautés, I'm going to show you what else we're going to kind of add into the sauce. And the beauty of this sauce, I think, is like, you look at it and you're like, oh, it's just some onions and garlic. You could make it anything, right? We talked about that, I think, during the beef udon noodles or something, where it's like at different stages of it, it has the opportunity to become like different things. I could make a really nerdy science reference. Actually, I will make a really nerdy science reference. It's kind of like when like, I have to, like that's my background. I kind of have to. So it's kind of when,
go for it.
When like, babies are developing in the womb or like organisms are developing and there's a cell, right? Initially, it could become anything. And as time goes on, they kind of differentiate a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. So what that means is that cell could become something. And then you say, okay, now we know it's going to be something in the lower body. Or now we know it's going to be something in the torso. But it still has all these options that it can become within that. You know, it can become the chest, it could become the neck. And then it gets more and more kind of specified to where ultimately you're like, okay, this is what it is, right? So that's kind of, does that make sense? Like it's
like, here, I'm going to put it in a different term. It's
sure.
like a choose your own adventure book.
Sure, yeah. It's kind of like you could make it whatever you want, you know? And I just think of it like, all right, now I just have onions. This could be any cuisine. It could be a base for like scrambled eggs. It could be anything. So now that is softening up, I'm going to add my next favorite thing, which is garlic. Garlic only needs like a little bit of time to become fragrant. So move you over here again. We're gonna add the garlic. And I've recently really been loving grated garlic. It gets my hands less smelly, and it also infuses the flavor much better just because it's in such tiny, tiny, tiny pieces. But it also means you have to be really careful not to let it burn because it's in a smaller piece. Just kind of rapidly sauteing it, and I can smell that it's kind of blooming now. Like the garlic's blooming. Okay. Just breaking up the pieces. And this doesn't really need to be in here for that long because remember, you're still adding a few more things. So it's not like this is the only chance the garlic has to cook. It's going to have some more time. All right. Now that we're sauteing this a little bit, the next thing I'm going to add is one of, I would say, like the biggest flavors of this dish. And that is going to be the chipotle peppers in adobo sauce. I used this in a dish before. I think it was in like I either made like a sauce or dressing out of it for some tacos, I believe.
Yeah. Was that with the cauliflower tacos?
Yes. So it just looks like that. And what I have here is about 4 to 5 of those peppers. So they're spicy. Yes, they're also smoky. They're also a little bit tangy. That's going to go in. And this is something, like I said, that has a very strong flavor. So if you don't like more of that like smoky flavor, don't add these. If you like the smoky flavor, but you don't want it to be this smoky, I would add like smoked paprika. You know, so that's a nice alternative for this, where you don't get as much of the heat, you don't get as much of kind of the intensity of it, but you still get the smokiness. I'm even smelling a little bit of like sweetness in this, even though when I eat it, it doesn't smell exactly sweet. Okay. Even that doesn't need, you know, too much time in there. All right. And then the next thing, because again, you're not trying to like burn any of these, obviously. You guys see that? Okay, the light, like, I feel like the lighting's a little off. Okay, and again, this could also become anything. I've made a base for soup like this before too. So there's that. The next thing we're gonna add is some frozen peas. Now, I also see this pasta as a way to like get your veggies in. So if you don't like just sitting and like munching on a carrot like a rabbit or something like Bugs Bunny, I guess you could. This is a very like, sophisticated way to get your veggies in, I guess. Frozen peas, guys. So I have about 1.5 cups here. I'm gonna add that. I'm just gonna cool the pan down too, because it's been sitting out for maybe like 45 minutes, but and this is also gonna prevent the chilies from burning. It's gonna prevent the garlic from burning because you're cooling it down. And it adds this nice color to it. So that's one. You can add other veggies. I mean, if you want to make this into like a mixed frozen veggie type thing, you could do that. I've never put like beans in here. I prefer to have beans just like cooked a different way, but this is one. So what I'm gonna do is just cover this. And then if you guys have questions, you can feed them through. And in the meantime, I'm just gonna drain this pasta before the next.
Any questions? And peas are like, frozen peas are one of those great things to like just keep a bag in your fridge, and you can throw a handful into things sometimes too. Like, so many items you can just toss them into, and it adds a lot, and it's a simple thing to keep in your fridge or in your freezer. It doesn't take up much space. I sometimes like to throw peas into like just ramen dishes and things like that too. Give it a little more color and a little bit of brightness. So
yeah, totally. Yeah. I actually, like a while ago, I did this like about a year ago. I cooked this dish on TV. It was like a beef pulao with the cucumber raita. So what that is, did I make that on here, Christine? I might have. I wonder if I made that here for one of my classes, but it's basically like ground beef, mixed vegetables, cooked up in some veg, and then mixed in with cooked rice. And then you can eat that with like a cooling yogurt or something like that, or a salad or something. And that had peas in it. And the main thing it brought was color, you know, like, and it comes in that mixed veg bag. So it's a really, like Christine was saying, a really useful thing to have on hand. Okay. Next, we're gonna add some, this already has some flavor, of course, with the onion, the garlic, the chipotle peppers, and a little bit of salt. The next, what we're gonna add is some herbs. So what I have here is I have sage, red pepper flakes. This is all dried, by the way, obviously. Dried rosemary, and then dried powdered thyme. And it smells really good. I actually used some version of this combination. I'm gonna add this to the pot, by the way. Some version of these herbs, a couple ways. Most recently this weekend, I made boneless, skinless chicken thighs, and I marinated them in olive oil plus those herbs. Put them in the fridge with like olive oil, lemon juice for 48 hours, and then pan seared them and finished them in the oven. And all the herb flavors really got into the chicken. It was delicious. I've also used it in like a vegetable lasagna. When I thought I had nothing to cook with, I had these herbs. I had just bought some sage, which I wasn't really like into. I don't know if there's any Simon and Garfunkel fans here, but if you guys ever heard that song where he's like parsley, sage,
rosemary and thyme. Yeah.
I don't like parsley, so I don't keep that on hand, but like I've got the rest. Yeah. Okay, give me 1 second.
And she's back, folks.
I'm back, guys. Now, just some instructions for the puppy upstairs. All right. Okay, this one's incredible. I'm not gonna lie. I feel like I say that all the time, and you guys must just think I'm this like.
No, we just have like smell envy all the time because we know what you're putting in it.
Yeah.
We're trying to like put it together in our heads what it really smells like in there, and we know it's amazing. And it's like Zoom just needs to get on some like smell-o-vision technology for us.
No, I wonder why that's so far behind. Like, I don't know why I just smelled that. It's brand new.
We're talking about smelling things.
Yeah, like, that must be it. I was like, we just got it. Okay. Next, so you guys see all that? You see everything in there? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the next thing we're gonna add, now that we have all the veg stuff, I'm gonna move all this kind of to the side. And here's another place where you can make a decision. If you want to add meat to this, you can. If you want to add uncooked meat, like some kind of ground, now's the time to do it. If you're adding things like beef or chicken, well, chicken takes longest, chicken and turkey, followed by like beef, in terms of cooking it, you know, in the pan. If you're using pre-cooked like grilled chicken, then I wouldn't add it at this stage. You know, I would chop it up small or cut them into strips and just add them later on, like after the sauce and stuff, just to warm through. But this isn't cooked, and so what I'm using today, it's called Meatless Crumbles. And it's just like the Mariano's brand, and it's a soy crumble. Again, if you want meat, you can add meat. I've made this with chicken before, and it's come out really well. So let's decide as we're pouring it, how much of this we're gonna add. I've kind of moved the veg around the corners, or around the edges of the pan, as you can see, because I just want as much contact for the crumbles as possible when I put it in the center. So why don't I just sort of measure a little bit along the center? And these actually cook very fast. Oh, what is this? Is that what?
Yeah, so they're soy meatless crumbles.
Yeah,
so it's like a meat substitute.
They look like that, right? So if you looked at it, it looks like ground beef. I know people that are vegetarian that like don't like this just because it looks like meat, and it says, even though it says meatless, it has the word meat on there. So it's like,
it's confusing.
Yeah. I added about like 3/4 of this bag, and this is a 1 pound bag. So it's that. And then there's a little oil on there. And again, like I said, these cook pretty fast. They don't need to be in here for that long. I'm just trying to get a little bit of sear on them before adding in the actual like creamy sauces, because otherwise they're going to get way too mushy. So this is just a way to like season them up a little. And the pan is very hot, and these are they were frozen. They've been out for a little bit.
Yeah, and whether you're doing it with like a meat substitute or you're using meat, it's always a good idea to like get a good sear on your meat before you introduce a sauce to it, because that's going to add to your flavor level and it's going to give it more dimension. So
yeah, and if I was making this and it wasn't going to be as creamy of a sauce, then what I might even do is do what we did with the mushrooms before and like crisp up some of them ahead of time. So that's another idea. Like if you don't want to, here, I'm just mixing this in with all the flavors now. I feel like you just eat this with a spoon. So that's nothing you can do. If you don't want to have, you don't like mushrooms, or you don't have them, or you don't want to go get them, but you're using soy crumbles or you're using ground meats, you could just shallow fry those to get that crispy texture. Set that aside, and then put the rest of the meat or the crumbles in here, incorporate that into the body of the sauce, and then use those crispy bits to kind of garnish it at the very end.
mm-hmm.
Heck, you could even do like, I mean, think of all the garnish. You could do crispy onions if you wanted.
Yeah.
You could, anything really, anything crispy would be great. Okay. And one thing that always happens to me at this stage is because the seasonings and the herbs and the flavors in here are super intense, and I don't mean that in a bad way, I mean that in a delicious way, but what happens is it's super concentrated at this point. And I have the nose of a bloodhound, so like this just smells very strong, but I know that it's going to be tempered by the coconut milk and by the tahini. Okay, and I'm already seeing that some of these crumbles are like sticking to the bottom because again they cook so fast. I'm just making sure to scrape them up, and you'll see that except for the peas, I am not covering and cooking this right now. Again, they don't want these to steam now because they're already going to be like kind of simmering in that sauce. This is another thing that I learned in salt, fat, acid, heat, is that like it doesn't just matter like the amount of heat, it matters when, just like with salt, when you apply it, and thinking about what's in the pan and not assuming that as soon as you turn off the stove, the cooking is done, because it's not, right? Things like the things in the pan don't know whether you've turned off the stove. They just know how hot the pan is. So like thinking about, if you're cooking it to X degree now, then how much more is it going to cook when you then simmer it in the sauce? So I'm just trying to be like mindful of that because I do not like when these get overly mushy. All right, these are basically cooked, right? So let's do like what I do in a lot of these classes, which is at this stage, what could these become? So do people want to give me ideas for like what you would do with crumbles like this? Like I have some ideas and I'm curious what you would use just to base like this.
Yeah, what might you guys take this and go with it next? I could see this becoming like part of a like cottage pie, like a shepherd pie kind of thing.
I've never done that. Wait, so what do? You like do you make that with like the pastry?
So traditionally it's like a mashed potato topping. It's kind of like a pot pie with like a mashed potato topping and then in the oven. So
Okay.
Definitely this could go down the taco route. That's always our first one is tacos. Yeah.
You can also just mix this with rice. I mentioned before I did like the beef pulao, whatever, like you could just use this as the protein. I wonder if you could even use this as like a stuffing for something. We made the stuffed peppers before. This is really
with eggs. That's a great idea.
Yeah. That's a great idea.
Like a hash with eggs.
Yeah, that's
like hashes too, right? No,
okay,
it could be a great stuffing for like poblanos.
yes, that's a great idea.
Mhm.
You could even put it on top of a salad. You know, if you just want add some protein to a salad, this is a way to do it. Okay, next thing I'm going to add, because those things are pre-cooked, is tahini. I found this in like the international aisle just at Mariano's. My son has a peanut allergy, and I try to be careful. This one is sesame. It's a sesame paste. That's what tahini is. So you can probably eat this. I usually just check to see if it's been like processed in a facility with da-da-da. And then if it is, then just try giving them in small amounts. Anyway.
Yeah, that's like me. My daughter has tree nuts, so I'm always.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One thing I will say with this tahini is be sure to like stir it really well because it comes with a little, it separates. There's a little oil at the top. And if you just use that, you're going to end up with kind of a thinner, like oily paste, which is not what you want. Okay, tahini's in there. I've put the heat on low, right? Because I don't want the crumbles to overcook. And like, look at that. Look at how creamy that's becoming already.
Oh my God, I just know that like smell from tahini. I'm imagining.
Oh yeah, I'm like getting it out.
Because it has that like really specific kind of smell, that tahini.
Like, you know, the thing is the tahini, it's one of those things that's like very difficult to eat a spoon of. Okay, like there's a word for it in Tamil, but I don't know what it's almost that like overly rich or like it coats your tongue so much that you're like, oh, will I live? Like it's a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay, so you might look at this and be like, this doesn't look like a pasta sauce at all. Well, that's because we haven't added our coconut milk.
Yum.
I'm going to add the coconut milk. Oh, this is separated on its own. Wow. Live TV, guys. That's what happens. Okay, I'm going to get this in here. Funny story about like coconut milk-esque things. Last week, I wanted to make my like coconut curry corn. It was like kind of like the elotes I made on here before, but a curry version. And I was like, great, I have everything. I set everything up. I was about to add the coconut milk in, and then I looked at the bottom and I was like, yeah, that looks right, coconut cream. And then I was like, is it the same as coconut milk? So then I looked up coconut cream online, and the only recipes are for pina coladas.
So I had a similar situation where I wanted to make pina coladas, or I planned to make pina coladas, and I had gone into the very large pantry that I very, very rarely do I know what all is even in there. Looking for coconut cream, thinking coconut milk would apply. No, it's not. These are not the same thing.
Sweetened, yeah. Okay. So does this look?
So someone's asking, do you have a specific coconut milk that you would recommend?
No, I try not to use, if I commit to using coconut milk in something, I try not to use like the low fat, no fat coconut milk. Like I just use the regular, either the full fat or normal or whatever that's called here. Let's see what this thing's called. Yeah, it just says coconut milk unsweetened. But the brand, I haven't found that it matters. So I would just use whatever's available to you. I know Trader Joe's has them. They're pretty inexpensive there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great because you can find all that stuff everywhere now. So it's
everywhere. Yeah. Okay, this is very cool because I'm smelling that like the sesame. I'm also smelling some sweetness from the coconut milk, even though it's not sweetened coconut milk. I'm smelling the chipotle peppers. And I'm smelling a little bit of the onion and garlic that we put in at the very beginning. So we really built this flavor like little by little by little. Okay, so let me try this. Yes.
Asaf wants to know, how would you describe the taste that you get combining coconut milk and tahini?
It's like heaven.
No,
I'm kidding. So I would say that when you just combine coconut and tahini, it tastes like a sweetened, watered down tahini. And it's honestly a little bit confusing for me when it's just those two. What I think brings those two together here is the chipotle peppers and adobo sauce, right? Because you're kind of like, oh, this is kind of creamy, this is kind of sweet, and then this cuts in with that heat. It cuts in with that smokiness, and then it just feels like you're tasting layers.
Yeah, because you get like the sweetness with the coconut milk, some of that like tang, but like richness with the tahini, and then the heat and the smoke from the chipotle. So it's definitely a very, very layered sauce.
Yeah, I would just eat this. I was gonna say, you know how I always suggest like alternatives for you guys? I was gonna be like, you know, you could just add a little water to this and just blend it and drink it as a smoothie. But like I wouldn't. I mean, no, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. But yeah, this tastes pretty good. We're almost done with the sauce. And I know it seems like, oh, there's this and there's this and there's this, but this is also why when I do these recipes, I try to give you guys ideas for multiple things you can make with the same ingredients, because I'm, like I said before, not a fan of buying a condiment for one dish. You know, so tahini, I used it here. I've used tahini for dressings. It works beautifully in dressings, you know, in like salad dressings. I use coconut milk in a number of different dishes. I make like coconut curry chicken, which tastes completely different than this. Okay, next thing we're gonna do, I'm gonna add a tiny bit of sugar. This is to kind of like bring out almost a little bit, not a ton, it's like less than a teaspoon, just a little bit, and it kind of marries with the coconut milk, and it just lets you know the other flavors are there without anything tasting actually sweet. It's kind of like when you're baking and you add a little salt to all your sweet stuff. I found that when I add a little sugar, or maybe it just makes me feel fancy when I do that, but I swear I can tell a difference, but like, can I? I don't know. Okay, and you'll see this is pretty thick now. And at this stage, what you want to do is check how thick it is and add a little bit of water. So I'm going to add a little bit of water to thin this out. Because keep in mind, once you add the pasta in there, the starch from the, you're not going to add the pasta water, but once you add kind of the starch from the pasta, it's going to thicken even more. And if you keep it overnight, it's going to thicken even more. So you want it to kind of be a little bit more watery. Add it a little by little. You don't want it to, you don't want to thin out the sauce so much that the flavor isn't as intense as you want. Okay. All right. And the last thing we're going to add here before we toss in the pasta and finish it out are some of these tomatoes. So these are just grape tomatoes that I've cut in half. They're a little bit sweet, actually. And I also like to do this where I like to add similar flavor using different ingredients. So I add a tiny bit of sugar. The coconut milk has a light sweetness, and this has a light sweetness, but it's not like honey, right? This has a little tartness. It has a little like acid. And that's also meant to kind of cut through that richness. So to Asaf, who was asking before, you know, how do those two taste together? They taste good when they have these kind of supporting players as part of it. All right, so now I'm just gonna add these tomatoes in here. The goal is not to kind of get these to like release all their water and completely mush down into, you know, a paste or something. You just want them in there for that little bit of brightness as you're eating it. And it adds a nice color too. Okay. And now we're going to add the pasta. The pasta is all done. Might need a little bit more water. You can use the pasta water, but when I was draining it before, I drained a little more of the pasta water than I would like. Otherwise, I would use the pasta water to water this down, just because that has some salt. It also has the starch from the pasta. And so the risk of sort of thinning the flavor out way too much is a little bit less, because you still have that body from the pasta water. But this still tastes pretty good. Okay. let's add the pasta. And again, I'm gonna add the farfalle in here. Like I said, you can add really any pasta of your choice. See, it's like a little sticky, so whoever suggested adding a little oil to the pasta, that's where this would have been helpful. Especially if I'm going to be storing it, like you were saying, Christine, like definitely putting a little bit of
Yeah, toss it with a little bit of oil to kind of coat all of the pasta and keep it from sticking.
yeah. I'm already going against what you're saying you guys do, which is you were saying that you can use the sauce for multiple things, but also because I do tend to get that sauce to pasta ratio wrong sometimes. It's a good idea to kind of keep them separate. I'm definitely going to do that in the future. But the benefit right now of doing this is, I know I'm going to eat all of it. Like we'll finish it. There's going to be no issue. Also, when I do this, the pasta isn't just coated in the sauce. It's almost like infused with the sauce. You know, it just sits in there. It soaks up those flavors.
Yeah.
So that taking a bite of the pasta, you don't taste like the sauce and then the pasta. You just taste like a well-married sort of, I guess. Okay. Mix this in. I love that sound. Do you know that sound of just like, I don't know how to describe it. So like kind of,
Someone could do like a whole ASMR video of people just stirring pastas and sauces. Seriously.
That's exactly what it is. Like
there would be 1,000 million subscribers.
Maybe I should post that on my Instagram like right after this.
Do just like an ASMR reel.
Mm-hmm. It's just gonna be me doing this. Okay. Cool. Okay, well, I'm very proud of myself because it looks like I got the pasta to sauce ratio right. If you're more of a methodical cook than I am, then you would know, and you would have made this exact version of pasta before. I haven't. Like I said, I'm adding mushrooms to it. I've made all these changes. But I think the key is like, when I cook, I try to find certain combinations that I really enjoy and then try to riff off of those, you know, because then I know, okay, I've figured these two out. What else can I add that makes this even better? Once I tried using smoked paprika and the adobe, and it just overpowered the sauce. You know, it was too much. So now I know just to use one or the other. Okay, and this is the pasta. I mean, I know it doesn't look like some like crowning jewel and it looks like a big old pot of pasta, but that's what it's meant to look like. Lift this up. See that?
Mm-hmm. She used grape tomatoes.
Yeah, these are great. Okay, and now, how can we forget Parmesan cheese?
Oh.
You could argue, guys, that this pasta is creamy enough. But to me, there's no such thing. Like there's, you know, like, what do you want from me? Like I added the tomatoes, I'm going to add a little bit of lemon juice. I'm trying to cut through the creaminess of all that. But I have found that Parmesan goes really, really well here. I think in the recipe, I put, you can use like Parmesan, you can use burrata. If you add burrata to this, it gives a really lovely, like melty, soft kind of texture to it. The flavor of Parmesan, the nuttiness that you get from Parmesan complements the nuttiness of the tahini really nicely, you know. And also what I like about this is it's not just pasta made with a bunch of cheese and cream. Like we're not using this as the base. We're adding this
at the end, yeah.
At the top. And then you can always, you know, for individual servings, top it with a little bit then. I keep going. It was a little bit. And finally, well, not finally, like almost finally, we're gonna add these.
Yes, Asaf, I agree with you. Those are some great ideas. He's suggesting adding maybe greens too, like cilantro, green onion. Is there anything else you think might be a good idea?
That's a great, I actually have some green onion. I might add that a little later. That's a great idea because like I said, it is super creamy. And you can have it sometimes be like, oh, is this a little too creamy? And then you're getting all the umami from the mushrooms. You're getting the Parmesan. What I'm going to use here is I'm going to use a squeeze of lemon over all of it. But the green is really nice for the crunch. It's good for the color, and the taste is nice. I have used, I know I said I don't like parsley, but in this I have used chopped parsley to garnish.
Yeah, I think some flat leaf Italian parsley would be nice to give you that really bright green, fresh.
Yeah.
And bring that to it. That's where it's going to work really well on a dish like this that's got so many other really bold, like punchy in the face kind of flavors going on, and this is going to bring it back in a whole different way, and it's going to go great with great with the lemon too.
Yeah, so I don't have parsley, but I have some. I might actually add some green onions to this after we're done. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to top it with these mushrooms. Let's have it all here, and then I'm going to toss it way through. And this is where, before I take a pic of this, I actually am going to put something green on it, because now I'm looking at it and I'm like, I haven't even tasted it, but it's almost like brown on orange on yellow on red, right? So now I'm like, ooh, a little green could go right in the center. So let me take you guys up here and show it to you close up. And then what I'll do, Christine, is once I add the greens, I will take a picture of it and I'll send it to you like right now. You can send it out with the
awesome. I'll send it out with the recipe tomorrow. So perfect.
So any other questions, guys?
Yeah.
You added the peas at the beginning, but and that's the green, but it kind of got lost.
Yeah.
Way.
Yeah. So the peas that are in there, it gives a little bit of color, but you're right. You add all these sauces and the color kind of dulls down. If I was using like fresh spring peas or something like that, I might add those at the very end. Another thing is, the reason I like the peas in here is when you bite into them, they give a little bit of sweetness too. So rather than the fresh component, I would say they give a little bit of that sweetness and a little bit of like burst of like juice when you're biting into them. But like someone said, like the actual greens will give the color now, because they haven't been like kind of cooked in with the sauce, and they'll give the crunch, which obviously the peas won't have the crunch right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
No. Okay. Well, this recipe and Sruthi's picture is going to be going out in your emails tomorrow. And then let's see, the rest of this week on Wednesday, we will be having Wine Wednesday, and we're actually going to be doing like a refresher of the basics with Mary, because it's been a while since we had our first Wine Wednesday, and just want to touch base on everything. And then Friday, we do have a new chef joining us, and he's going to be making a tomato bisque with seared sea scallops and gin.
Yum.
Very excited to see that. And then we will have more coming with Sruthi soon. I will be contacting you to plan out our next episode.
Yes.
And we are all very excited and so happy that you all joined us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Always amazing. Now I need some pasta.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone have a great evening, okay?
Bye.
Bye.